Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. I have the pleasure of having back with us from well over a year and a half ago, Mr. John Lee, the chairman of Silver Elephant Mining Corporation, to talk about the silver market. A lot has changed since we last talked. Hello, John. How you doing, sir?
Good to be back, Sal. Thank you for the invite.
Sure thing. Yes. Well, the silver market has really changed dramatically since we last spoke, and it's been remarkable to see. What would you say of all of the things that are going on geopolitically with the Russia-Ukraine situation? We have supply chains still broken. We still have COVID-19. There's still some talk about that having an effect on some things. And these high premiums, what do you think is probably the most important fundamental that's happening nowadays here in late 2022 with silver?
Yes, Sal, as you know, we're talking about beloved metal, and it's a bit of a love and hate relationship, partly because of the volatility of silver. I was just on another call with David Morgan this morning, and we chatted for about an hour. So I don't think the fundamentals for silver has really changed. There are really two components to it. There is industrial demand 70%, and there is the investment demand that's at around 30%. And I would say since last time we talked, the price of silver price has gone down from around almost $30 plateau to right now trading at almost unimaginable at printing at around $19. It's a 35+% correction. That's mostly to do with the strength of the dollar. I have a Twitter account in January or in February of 2022. I put out a forecast of a bit of a major correction in the stock market as a function of the rising US dollar, and that is due to the rising interest rate. At the time, I said that we can easily see a 3% 10-year yield for the U.S. Treasury, and back then the Treasury was at 1%. So little do we know, I think to everybody's surprise, we're sitting at around 4.5% for the 10-year. And as a result of that, silver is going through the headwind because it is competing for that investment dollars. And in this, even though in terms of the real interest rate is still in the negative territory for the dollar given the inflation, however, as Henry Ford said, right, there's no better way to deceive the public than to inflate. So on paper, you're getting that interest, but in reality, it's not catching up to the cost of living.
And the Fed is going to be raising rates again. It seems like we're recording this video just before the Fed meets again for another rate hike, and that tends to put pressure on silver as well. You've got interest rate hikes, you've got the bond yields, as you talked about, and you have the strength of the dollar. Those three things have put a lot of pressure on the metal. And you mentioned the love-hate relationship. That is for sure with silver. There's a lot of emotion tied to it. I've had folks come on my channel say that, hey, I'm tired of silver. It's not doing anything. It's here we are in an inflationary environment of 8.2% inflation, and I'm not seeing a return on my investment with silver. I've been stacking physical silver for years, and it's just not doing what I think it should do. So what's your outlook? What would you say to that person, especially with somebody in the mining space? What would you say to that person who is discouraged on silver?
I don't think there is a magic potion, and I'm not a psychologist, so it's always tough to catch the bottom, and the bottom is always in hindsight. I was quite sort of neutral on the metals with the headwind on the rising interest rate, the rising dollar, especially for also in the mining industry, given that it'll be swimming upstream to in an equity correction to be investing in mining shares. However, going forward, I'm increasingly bullish for gold and silver, even though, as you referenced, that the Fed is coming on Wednesday and likely to have another hike. But gold and silver, especially silver, is a very sensitive metal that usually those metals will bottom ahead of a peak in the interest rates. And as a student of history, you will know too that in 1980, that interest rates and metal prices actually go up in tandem. So it's actually that inflation expectation that drives the metal prices. And then even though they're still negatively correlated with rising interest rate, in that first phase of inflation, right? I mean, if you look at all the other countries, sort of Weimar or Banana Republic in South America, all these countries are hyperinflation and they're rising interest rates, but that doesn't slow down the gold and silver prices in their priced in their currency. And certainly gold has broken out or at a near all-time high in terms of euro and in terms of the British pound. So there's a lot of good news going for silver, and given I think there's going to be a bit of a pause or a very limited room for the Fed to raise further interest rates, at least for the next 3 to 6 months, with the oil price come back down from 120s to the 80s. Who knows? I think we might be a bit surprised after maybe within a couple of days after the Fed hikes, and then where the relief rally come into play for the metals. And regarding love and hate, I want to just reference a little bit. I want to just say a little bit more. I never thought silver go down below 20, and yet here we are. If we were to look at the price chart of silver, which I have in front of me, that's a chart that doesn't look very natural. You have a lot of spikes up, and then within a very short time, you get these spikes down. You certainly feel a lot better if silver were to go like bottom at 1750 briefly in early September, and would be going up, say 5 cents a day or whatever it is, right, to come to where we are today at $19. Then to be spiking up 21 to $21 a couple of times, and spike down to 18 and a half at $19 where we are here now. So, in a bull market, the job of the market is to make as few people to have as few people make money as possible, and the way to do that is to create that volatility. But I do think that the silver has bottomed into 17 and a half, which is where it was coincidentally in July of 2020, when silver ran up, as you recall, from 17 and a half to almost $30 within the span of less than 2 months. And given the fundamentals are more bullish now, so there's no reason not for silver to exhibit the same behavior, to exhibit the same price trends. The chart doesn't look very natural, and I've studied the silver industry silver price for more than 20 years. And David Morgan and I talk frequently, and I've read pretty much all the notable literature there is about silver and research. Gold and silver are money. So you're dealing with some very powerful forces. And with all the geopolitical uncertainties and inflation for certain sectors of the players, for the Feds, it's much better to paint a good storyline to have a silver price low than a silver price high. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of questions by the mainstream. So, and how it works is every time you see there's a lot of big surge on the silver prices. In 2022 alone, even though the price is down almost 35%, but you see flash of brilliance of silver from February to March. It went from 22 to 28. And then you have another flash upwards in July from 17 to 21, and another one from September at 17 and a half to 21. These movements are very violent. $2 to $3 in a month. That is really actual sort of the market trying to move the silver price to its real equilibrium. But unfortunately, you get some players in the silver space that are not exactly profit driven. I suppose the cancellation price would be eventually, given there's a limited amount of silver, that you can throw a limited amount of paper to it. Eventually, the physical market will triumph. And you see that play out in a number of different markets, like palladium in 2018, and nickel briefly in March of 2022 as well.
It's a volatile market with silver, and overall, with these spikes, and we see these massive dips, that's just par for the course with silver, as we've seen for the last couple of years, as you've mentioned here. I agree with you, Mr. Lee, that I think we're going to see silver come out below these lows, and this is a good time to get in. We are seeing some premiums in the physical space, but there's other avenues as well too. But I certainly encourage to get a hold of some of the charts you're looking at there. I'm not sure exactly what you're seeing, but if you look at it through a 5-year and 10-year span, at minimum, silver's done fairly well. We're catching up to where we were just pre-pandemic levels, and I think that we are seeing kind of at the low end of it, and I believe silver's undervalued as well. I'm not one of these to the moon types of individuals that say the silver is going to go to $50 tomorrow. But at the same time, as you have spoken with other analysts out there like David Morgan and others, folks like you and Mr. Morgan, you're more in tune with the markets. And for what you do in the mining sector, you've got to know this stuff and you've got to see the fundamentals. You've got to power your way through it. And that leads us to questions a little bit about silver mining. With the massive spikes and violent moves, the volatility in the market, how does that affect your business in the silver mining exploration with Silver Elephant?
So the silver supply has been fairly steady, and given silver is produced mostly as a byproduct from massive zinc and some of the copper mines. So in terms of the production of silver, we haven't really seen any big movement in the supply of silver. However, I think that's going to change as the inflation catch up, and there's going to be likely less. I mean, the mining managers and mining companies are now creating new mines are the last thing on their mind. It's about optimizing the mine, cutting costs, figuring out a way to sustain to elongate the mine life. But thinking about creating a new mine is with all the different supply chain delays, inflation, and geopolitics is the last thing that are on our mind. I think that's the first point. What drives the silver price is always that speculative demand, not as much as to where diminishing supply or even increasing industrial demand. Secondly, you talked about the 5-year chart. Technically, right now, silver is, I think, bottom in 17.5 in September. And that is a very, very multi-year, decade-long strong support level at 17.5. And silver sitting right now is at around $19. That's the 50-day moving average. It's going to oscillate, in my view, between $19 and the 200-day moving average. And that's sitting at around $21.50. And $21 is also a very strong resistance level. So you will see silver likely bounce between 19 and 21. And we talked about a lot of these knee-jerk movement, both in the long term and the short term of silver price chart. As I also said, that there is a lot of managing, quote unquote, to put it in a benign term of silver out there, because the powers really don't want silver to be flying high, because that signals the erosion of the confidence of the fiat currencies. However, these people they have a limited armor, because eventually they still have to put out their physical silver to water the hose of the fire. So they're very, very selective and cherry picking on their spots to, for lack of a better term, raid the silver market. So a lot of times they take advantage of a rising dollar. So when the dollar is rising, is the time they really love to whack the silver market. However, they will be a lot more cautious and a lot more selective, and then keeping some of their powder dry in an environment where the dollar is on the way down or in a consolidation mode, which is what I believe it will do for the dollar for the next 6 months. So that's why we see that when the pendulum went to the extreme, and we see some sort of what the silver can do. And I think that the action is going to be even more violent to the upside when the dollar index stabilizes or was trading down. We just got to wait for a little patience. Right now, I believe is a very good entry point for silver. It's going to do a couple of rounds for the traders. It'll be a great market between 19 and 21. And then from there, we just got to wait for the market to silver to take out $21. And then from there, it's gonna go pretty quickly to 28. There's not an awful lot of resistance, and from there, all bets off. So just one quick point I wanted to talk about is actually very relevant to silver, and that is the increasing uncertainties in the geopolitics, and which I believe is really only triumphed by what happened in the World War I and World War II. People ask me about when the Ukraine war is gonna finish, and I'm not an expert in that area. But my answer to that is more, when is the next war is going to start? It is a realistic, a distinct possibility. It's definitely not outside of a black swan that you're going to see the clash of titans of the world's two largest economies in China and United States. The United States already put a ban on importing of high-powered semiconductor chips in China. And China could very well put export restrictions of rare earth critical minerals into the United States and other places. And then you see already in situation where Russia's money in the SWIFT system was confiscated. Well, China has over $1 trillion. That's just the Chinese government's foreign reserve. And in addition, Chinese individuals have the dollar's always been the safe haven, but safe haven no more. They saw what happened with the Russian tycoons and having their yachts and boats and banks taken away from them. With these geopolitics in mind, it is an extra added catalyst to a silver market. It's what akin to what I call the Hunt of the Red October, one of my favorite movies. So I only watched that movie where the officials are playing enemies in public, but in the end, all the money is come back to New York and Miami from the Russians and from the Chinese. But that is no more. So absent of that safe haven dollar status, silver and gold is looking increasingly attractive for these anonymous people that want to really store in their wealth that can no longer be achieved through bank accounts in Switzerland and also in Miami and New York.
So in closing here, what is new with Silver Elephant Mining Corporation?
Talking about Silver Elephant, we've been, to some of your listeners and audience that may be shareholders, we've been very, very quiet in 2022. We see a sort of a mixed market, and that's why we choose to hunker down and to really conserve and minimize dilution and not to be pounding our chests out there. So we've been really conserving our treasury. However, we have been putting a lot of work into improving our community relations and optimizing some of the technical parameters for a forthcoming feasibility study in 2023. And the mine is ready well to allow with over $30 million in drilling, over 100,000 meters, and has already over 100 million ounces of silver. 3/4 of that is the measure indicated. So I would say for some of your audience who has a bit of risk appetite, I mean, traditionally silver mining company has the leverage to the silver prices both on the upside and the downside, and then silver mining companies have been sort of really being smashed. Downs are anywhere from 50 to 80%. And so I think for some of your listeners, my recommendation has always been not put all your eggs in one basket. So in the silver mining investment realm, you have the First Majestic, Coeur d'Alene, Hecla, and then as the major producer. And in the second tier mining juniors, you have like the Silver Elephant and a couple other junior mining companies already have established resource. You don't really need to, at this valuation, play the discovery, making a drill hole discovery play. And then if you stack up the Silver Elephant chart side by side with, say, First Majestic and the silver price, they look almost identical, except that Silver Elephant, on the way down, we go down more, but on the way up, vice versa, we go up more. And so it's just something for your audience to look at. And like I said, I think it's a very attractive risk to reward entry point.
Well, very good. A great summation of Silver Elephant Mining. And I will post a link to the Silver Elephant Mining in the description below this video. And I want to thank Mr. John Lee for joining me and sharing his expertise on the markets and on silver. And I want to extend a multitude of gratitude to all of you for taking the time to watch this video, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.